There's a lot of talk out there about leaving society behind during a collapse, moving away, bugging out, and going out into the woods and constructing a shelter sort of like this. Now, I want to talk about some of the realities of that. I've spent a lot of time outdoors. I've lived in the woods for months on end. I know a thing or two about what it's like to live on the road, to live out of your bag. And I can tell you this, I required support. And every so often, there'd be somebody who gets on the Appalachian Trail. I spent a lot of time on the Appalachian Trail, about 6 months of my life, hiking across the eastern seaboard from Georgia all the way up to Maine. And let me just say this, from crossing the 100-mile wilderness to other long-distance packs, doing 30-mile days on occasion, up and down the mountains here and there were always people who would come out and say, you know, I'm going to hunt for food along the way. I'm going to, you know, gather herbs and cook things, and they come out with a big knife, and they're survivalists. They don't make it very far, I promise you that. They rarely make it past the first few. They won't even make it 100 miles for sure. And this happens constantly. It's almost kind of an open joke in the thru hiking communities about these kind of characters, because there's just a lot of people under that misconception that you can just go into the woods and find food. It's a lot of work to collect food. It's a lot of work to hunt, and it doesn't always work. If you've watched a whole bunch of videos and you have experience like that, that's one thing. And trying to hunt and trying to gather when you're living in a comfortable home, you know, that you're going to go back to when you're done gathering out in the woods, is one thing. When you're trying to gather enough calories to not only gather more calories, but rather you are actually trying to gather enough calories to do that as well as to hike. You need a lot of calories to hike. Hiking is hard work, especially when you're going through brush, especially when you're not following a trail. That gets really, really difficult. And people don't get that. Hiking on a trail, that's pretty good. You can do like 3 miles per hour. That's doable. When you're hiking through brush, you're lucky to get 1 mile per hour. Anyone who's hunted knows this. That you try to stick to trails. You're even better to be on a road. You can easily do 3 miles per hour, though if it's pavement, you will start to hurt your feet pretty bad. But let's talk about gathering food. What months of the year are you out there? Because, I mean, if it's summertime, if it's springtime, okay, maybe that will work. When there's berries out, you can gather things like that. But what about wintertime? How many months are you really going to be hiding out in the woods? Now, I think most of us would kind of get the whole idea. Right, you're getting what I'm putting down. Most of us don't really want to live out in the woods. That's why we don't. It's not convenient. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. And those things, when there's a collapse of society, that doesn't change. It's still just as inconvenient. It's just as uncomfortable. In fact, it gets worse. You can't resupply. It's not a good option. Now, I'm not saying that you won't ever have to do it. I'm not saying that you won't be forced into that. What I am saying is that it should be a last option. It should be one of the last options. So there's better options out there. Before I get into all the downsides of living in the woods and living off the land, look back at things like the Great Depression, right? Look at the Great Depression when people were trying to survive. What did they do? They moved to where work was. And I think that that's going to be something similar to what we're going to have to experience, the collapse of the dollar, difficulties. Now, I mean, If things go completely sideways, okay, we may end up being in a place where you have to head to the hills and hide. But for how long? And that's one of the things I think that we should talk about is you can go hide, but you can only hide for so long. Eventually, you're going to have to go back into society. There's going to be things that you need, medicines. You're going to get an infection or something like that, and you're going to need something. Your backpack breaks. I used to have a external frame backpack. I actually hiked the entire Appalachian Trail in an external frame backpack. I started off when it wasn't cool, and by the time I ended 10 years later, my trip to the Appalachian Trail, it was downright antiquated, right? I mean, it was like, everyone's like, why do you carry that thing? I'm like, because I started in this backpack, I'm going to finish in this backpack. I had a backpack very similar to that on a different trail, and it snapped in half while I was hiking. Like the whole backpack just like broke right in half. And I was able to use part of the frame, and I was able to kind of tie it all back together, which it sort of worked to get me the rest of the way. It was a 70-mile trail here called the Laurel Highlands Trail. It's a cool trail. That was an experience. Yeah, equipment does tend to fail. Maybe your stove blows up. Had that happen to me too. That was not cool, having my backpacking stove like literally turn into a giant fireball around me. I should do a video on backpacking stoves. But your equipment's going to fail you. You're going to need to go into civilization. You're going to need money when you get there. Now, they may not be taking dollars, may not want some paper, but they're going to have some sort of medium of exchange, whether it's cigarettes, lighters, silver. And there's a decent chance that people will accept all of those, but they may not be the preferred source there. So you're going to need some currency. How are you going to get that currency? You're going to have a job. And as much as everyone likes the idea of when collapse comes, we're not going to have to work. Yeah, we're going to have to work a lot more than we ever did before. And you know what? A lot of people are going to have to get jobs with people that they don't like, doing things that they don't like, because you're going to have some people with more resources than others. Hopefully you're one of them. But those people are going to be willing to trade those resources for your energy, your time, and you can get resources for exchanging your time. I mean, that's as old as time itself, jobs. So where's the work going to be? Can you find work? And what can you do about it? Getting to a farm that's willing to hire you on, give you food in exchange for work, you and your family, maybe get you guys a tent, or allow you to have some land to just build on, you know? That's all very real considerations. That's what happened during the Great Depression. And that may be where we go again. You might become migrant labor. But if you're working at a farm, the farm and all the workers are going to work to protect you. They're going to be a part, you're going to be a part of a family and a crew that's going to be looking out for each other. And that's an important thing right there. So some of the downsides of just going out and just bugging out, right? Some of the big ones. No security. You don't have any security. You don't have a perimeter if you're out in the woods. What happens if someone stumbles across you? If there's a lot of other people going out into the woods, you're not going to be alone. And one of the big things I've learned hiking across the United States and elsewhere is a lot of land, at least in the east coast of the United States, belongs to somebody. It may look like wilderness, but somebody owns it. And that person usually doesn't take kindly to people crossing their land. They put up fences. They tell people, don't come in here. And if you have land and it's a crisis situation, what would you do if somebody broke onto your land started camping out on your land. A good Christian person might tell them very strongly to leave and to move on. A non-Christian or a non-friendly person would potentially do worse. That's probably not going to be a great option for you, just going out there and camping out on somebody's land, mooching off somebody else. That doesn't win you friends and influence people, right? You know what I mean? So you don't have any security, but not only that, but you don't have any shelter. And that's a big one. Just the idea of having home. Now, if you've been out in the woods and you've camped out in the woods, you know the feeling. It's in some ways exhilarating to not have a place and just know that everything I need is in my bag. But that also gets old. That gets really old. And the idea of being under a roof where if it rains, you don't get wet, where if it snows, you don't get cold, and in the heat of the day, you can get under something. Being out somewhere where you don't have any shade whatsoever, and the sun can be just as bad or even worse. Or if you're in some place in the country that gets lots and lots of wind, that's brutal too. Not having any shelter is a big, big deal. Now you can build a little lean-to, you can build a stick shelter, but it ain't the same. Even a tent is better than those stick shelters. Trust me, I've slept under both. And I'd rather a tent any day than to live in a stick shelter, because stick shelters, they have a tendency to leak. A tent, at least, only sometimes leaks, right? So shelter. You don't have any information about what's around you, and that is not good. Not knowing what's around you is a big deal. When you're home, or even if you're staying at someone else's home, this is the lake at the park, if you have a friend who knows what's kind of around, you can always ask them, like, hey, what's over that hill? Where should we go to get this or get that? Having information is huge. Someone comes stumbling onto your friend's property. Your friend may very well know them. And that's a big deal. So having information around you is about what's around you, where to find stuff, how to get stuff, relationships, very big stuff. Just going out into the woods and hunting, not so great for that. No food source, obviously. You're gonna be scrounging. You're going to be trying to put stuff together. Is it possible? Well, it's more possible in certain areas of the country than it is in other areas of the country. Let's just put it that way. Some areas of the country at some seasons is going to be a lot more livable. But there's downsides. You know, Florida may have a lot more food, but also has more infections, more mosquitoes, more problems as well. So there's downsides to that. Up here in Pennsylvania, less food in the woods, but less disease. A little easier to stay sort of dry and stuff like that. So, but you have the winter to deal with, right? So that season makes it even worse when there's no food, right? Anyway, food. What about water source? We were just looking at this water source right here. I would not drink that untreated, generally speaking. I might try purifying that with sunlight, but that would not be such a great option, generally speaking. I would think long and hard about that. But water sources. If you're going somewhere in the woods, you're going to have a water source that's probably not treated. Now, if you get up in the mountains, if you get up in the woods enough where you know there's nothing above you, like no farms with cattle and stuff like that, you can probably get away with drinking the water. Like along the Appalachian Trail, I drank most of my water untreated. And by most, I mean almost all the time. Except when I was in streams that were clearly contaminated with stuff upstream. I'd usually just bypass those and wait until I found something else. But that's going to be a big concern. If you're using something that, whether it's a pump or water, a life straw or something else like that, you're going to run out because the life straws only last for so long. Water pumps Water filters only last for so long. Then after those, you got the question of if you're using chemicals, when you run out of chemicals. So that's always a consideration. Whereas if you're in civilization, you can have access to better water. A spring that has been marked off to be just used for drinking. Protected water sources, that kind of stuff. Just the fact that a lot of people own the land is I can't underscore that enough. Whenever I've tried bushwhacking, you just run into the fact real fast that at least across the East Coast, somebody owns practically all the land. Even when you're in a forest, national forest, in a park, the government owns that land and other people are using it as well. We're not as spread out as you would think. There isn't as much wild space as you think there is. If you're out west in the mountains, in the central states, okay, that's a different story. But you fly over the United States and you'll see so much of the land is cultivated as farms. You can see it. You can see the plots from the air. And even where you think there's nothing over there, you see roads. All over the United States. And the United States isn't that densely populated, but it's a lot more densely populated than you think. And trying to flee into the woods is not going to get you as far away from civilization and people as you think it will. My recommendation is be ready for that. Be ready to hide in the woods if you need to. Have equipment and the knowledge and the skills to do that, but don't jump to that conclusion. Don't jump to that option very quickly. Having a developed bug out location, having a farm or a friend that is prepared that you can go to their place, make a mutual assistance pact. If things get bad here, we'll come to your house. If things get bad where you are, you come to my house and we'll sort things out. That's a really good idea. Really good idea, friends, because you don't know where things are going to get bad. But if you're separated by a fair distance, there's a good chance that both of you won't be affected by the same imminent threat. And if it's a slow burn like the Great Depression, you're going to want to band together with people as best you can to provide your own resources, to make money, so that you guys can all eat. Those are my thoughts. Please do share your thoughts down below. But thanks for joining Poplar Prepper. I'm Steve Poplar, and until we meet again, God bless you all.